Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror.
Today, we will explore the secrets and past of Victor Mordenheim, the obsessed and unscrupulous scientist who managed to reanimate corpses through science. Before we begin, a few brief clarifications and announcements. First, I would like to comment on Wizards of the Coast's recent announcement of the return of Ravenloft with Ravenloft, the Horrors Within. There is still little information about the book, but it's possible to see that some of its Dark Lords and domains will be reintroduced, as well as some new race options like the Lupin, who originally came from Mystara's setting. A curious addition is Cthulhu as a Dark Lord, something I honestly wasn't expecting. Although Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft was a disappointment for me, especially because of the change in tone and break with the lore of the classic setting, at least the cover art of this book seems closer to the classic setting in terms of Strahd's appearance. I also take this opportunity to announce the recent release of my colleague Leandro Zerbinati from the Black Feather and his co-author Diego Silva Lisboa, who launched The Shrouded, a campaign setting for the Imaginary system and for the 5th edition of D&D, where a catastrophe has shaken the structure of reality and the souls of the dead return to the world, either in their decaying bodies or as specters capable of interacting with the physical world. Returning to our video, it is important to remember that this video will focus on Lamordia from the classic Ravenloft setting, and will consider the events and characters that existed in the domain before the reboot carried out by Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft. At the end of my video coverage of Lamordia from the classic Ravenloft setting, I will make some considerations and comparisons with the new version of Lamordia in Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft. Furthermore, in some official publications, we find several inconsistencies in the timeline regarding Lamordia, with dates and references that are contradictory. To try to bring some coherence to these dates, we will use as reference the revised and annotated timeline by John Mangrum. This excellent file is not official, but it presents the most complete and coherent attempt to organize a timeline of the classic Ravenloft setting. I will leave the link to this in the video description. Are you ready? After being shipwrecked on the Isle of Agony and confronted by the creature Adam, we are transformed by our lycanthropic curse and commit brutal murders in Lamordia. After reverting to our human form, we are captured and taken to Modernheim Sanatorium as violent lunatics. Tied in a cell, we undergo yet another transformation into werewolves, to the astonishment of the institution doctors and scientists. Our condition generates great curiosity and debate, and some plan our dissection for study, but some kind of bargain is made in the shadows, and we are transported to Modernheim Mansion. We are taken to a parlor, where a hunchback assistant frees us from our chains, and Dr. Victor Mordenheim enters the room. Noticing our nervous state, he opens a bottle of cognac and offers us glasses. The scientist then informs us that he has a peculiar interest in studying the regenerative capabilities of werewolves, and wants to experiment with us to advance his research. He proposed that, if we volunteer, he will cure us of our curse, ensuring that our bodies are no longer subject to such bestial transformations. Noticing our hesitation, he speculates that perhaps our encounter with Adam may have contaminated us with untruths about him, and then begins to reveal a little more of his past.
Hour of the Raven.
You have faced my creation, Adam. That is not something I am proud of. He is a mistake, a failure of science. The monster is responsible for my greatest pain, having murdered poor Eva and left my beloved Elise on the brink of death. But, as I have proven time and time again, there is no obstacle that science cannot overcome, not even death. There will be no death for Elise, not while I still breathe. I will bring her back, whatever the cost. Victor Mordenheim is an unscrupulous scientist who was the first Dark Lord of Lamordia. The character is an adaptation for the Ravenloft setting of the scientist Victor Frankenstein from Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein. The scientist is an arrogant and obsessed man, capable of overcoming any moral and ethical barrier to achieve his goals. The character is a perfect opportunity to explore themes such as the dangers of unbridled pursuit of knowledge, the responsibility for creation, and the ethical limits of science. Victor Mordenheim appears to be a middle-aged man, although he is top-aged around the age of 30. Thin and tall, he has grey hair, sunken eyes, and a pale anemic complexion, the result of his incessant work, poor diet, and hours away from sunlight inside his laboratory. His body bears some marks of times and injuries. He has a scar on his forehead from a childhood fall, and part of his earlobe is missing after a failed experiment on a dog, resulting in a bite. The tip of his left ring finger was also amputated due to a surgical blunder. Victor is always dressed in austere clothes, in typical Lamordian fashion, or his white lab coat when he is in his laboratory. He always carries a ring with his family emblem and a pocket watch, a gift from his wife Elise. His temperament is cold and austere, but he always seems tense and tired. This tension never overflows in outbursts of anger or emotion, and after slight tremors and a deep breath, he always regains his composure. Victor is obstinate in his research and arrogant, considering himself above ethical and moral issues. Perhaps his most human characteristic is his attachment to his ailing wife, but such affection leads her to unspeakable torment and may be a mixture of remorse, selfishness, and insanity. Modernheim is a poor combatant, although he has some training with the use of arquebuses and rapiers. Those who confront him must beware of his use of alchemical substances and poisons. In combat, he seems fearless, knowing that he cannot be destroyed as long as his creature Adam survives. Victor Mordenheim has an empathic and telepathic connection with his creature Adam. Although he is unable to know his creature's thoughts, he feels all of Adam's emotions, and even the physical pain felt by the monster is also felt by Victor. The connection is even deeper, and their destinies are intertwined. If Victor is destroyed in combat, his soul will be immediately transferred to a recent corpse in Lamordia. The body will be supernaturally revived, and over the course of a few days, it will transform into its attributes and physical appearance until Victor is fully reconstituted. This ability only exists while Adam is alive. The only way to completely destroy the scientists is by simultaneously destroying Adam and Victor Mordenheim. Victor lives in Schloss Modernheim, accompanied by his servant Igor and his frail wife Elise. Lamordians view Dr. Mordenheim with suspicion, although his genius sometimes attracts other academics or even apprentices. Victor no longer holds the position of Dark Lord of Lamordia, and only his creature can choose to close the domain's border. But what does the past of this stubborn and unscrupulous scientist and his dark creations hide? Victor Mordenheim was born into the Lamordian aristocracy, and from an early age, death was his enemy. He never accepted when his mother died from a disease, and since childhood he dedicated himself to the study of scientific and arcane arts to one day conquer death. Soon, his rational and methodical mind abandoned obscure and arcane studies in favor of chemistry, physics, and biology. As a child, he climbed a tall tree to try to observe a surgery that was being performed, but he fell and hit his head, and still carries the scar to this day. What he glimpsed obsessed him, and he began to perform experiments, surgeries, and dissections on wild and domestic animals. In one of these attempts, he tried to study the body of one of the family dogs. An error in the dosage of the sedative caused it to attack Victor, tearing off part of his earlobe. His father decided not to reattach Victor's earlobe in a surgical procedure, so that it would be a lesson in humility for him. Victor dedicated himself to the study of medicine, and at the age of 21 he graduated as a doctor. During his years of study, he met and became romantically involved with Elise von Brenthofen, the daughter of one of his teachers, a brilliant and intelligent young woman who shared Victor's passion for science. His father died shortly after his graduation, and Victor liquidated his properties. After marrying Elise, he was a happy and wealthy man, with the resources to pursue his ambitious projects. They moved to a new city, and he began working as a surgeon in a hospital. For years, he used his access to corpses in the hospital to conduct experiments. However, during a surgery, he made a mistake and cut the tip of his finger. This accident ended up revealing some of his macabre experiments to other colleagues, and he was expelled from the hospital. Victor then moved to an imposing and isolated mansion, which he renamed Schloss Modernheim, where he would have the tranquility and isolation to continue his studies. Victor divided his attention between his research and his relationship. Although the couple wanted a child, they soon discovered that they were infertile, a situation that cast a shadow over the relationship. The diagnosis made Victor even more obsessed. An enemy of mortality, he now wanted to create life, and believed he could reanimate a corpse by scientific means, granting it the spark of life. No type of morality, ethics, or religious dogma could stop his work. Modernheim was a staunch atheist, and believed that nothing should oppose or mediate the brilliance of the human intellect. For 13 years, he dedicated himself to his work, and such was his obsession that even his beloved Elise became an intolerable distraction. To deepen his studies, and to conceal some of his criminal acts, such as the theft of corpses from cemeteries, he asked her to go visit some distant relatives for a while. Only Victor and Rogue remained in the property, a deformed servant who had served the family for many years and had become his accomplice and lackey. Some say that Modernheim's defiance of the gods caused them to withdraw, abandoning the mortal human to his own madness. Something even more sinister, however, watched closely as he worked, while he sank into crimes and profanities to achieve his goals. The Dark Powers elected Victor Mordenheim as a Dark Lord, while mists fell upon all of Lamordia. While all the land was surrounded by mists, none of that mattered to the scientist, who only could think about his work. After years of preparation, he finally stitched together the body of his creation from countless distinct corpses and used his reanimation process to bring it back to life. On this fateful night, the mists that surrounded Lamordia and hovered over his property parted, and Lamordia merged with the core lands of the mists. The creature came into the world without memory, and Victor named him Adam. A deep bond was established between creator and creature, but Victor felt that there was something wicked in those dead eyes. He would never accept such explanation, but in the abandonment of the gods, something sinister has settled in the distorted and disturbed soul that inhabited their reanimated body. Victor Mordenheim was filled with pride for having created life and conquered death, and he began the process of educating Adam. The creature lived confined to the property to avoid questions from the community. Despite the slow progress, the creature possessed the potential for learning, and Modernheim summoned his beloved wife Elise back to his property. Modernheim presented Adam to her as the son they could never have, but all Elise felt was a deep revulsion for the creature. Adam did little to improve the situation, and began to show a disturbing affection for Elise, perhaps a result of his empathic bond with his creator. Elise, in turn, had a deep horror of his husband's actions, and Adam's grotesque appearance caused her revulsion and horror. For 2 years they lived in this cycle of rejection and suffering, until Modernheim, in an attempt to appease family relations and provided a desired son for Elise and a sibling for Adam, adopted a 7-year-old orphan and named her Eva. Elise immediately grew fond of the girl, treating her with great affection and care, fulfilling her deep desire for motherhood. However, Eva's arrival at Modernheim's property only increased family tensions. Adam and Eva began to develop a friendship, as the child did not view his grotesque appearance with any prejudice. Modernheim, always cold and calculating, wished to use Eva as a twisted attempt to encourage his creature to deepen its social development. Elise, in turn, believed that Adam was a threat to the child and saw jealousy and desire for revenge in his eyes. Elise and Victor still argued constantly, and Elise threatened to abandon her husband, taking Eva away with her, which would be intolerable for Adam. The creature then planned to go to Eva's room at night and flee with the child, living together far from its creator and his wife. However, he crept into Eva's room to tell her his escape plans and asked her to gather her things. His unexpected arrival startled her. Adam put his hand over her mouth to stop her from screaming and drawing attention. However, Elise was awake and entered the room at the moment upon hearing her voice, witnessing the creature over the child with its hand on her face. She exploded in fury, fearing that Adam would hurt the child, and wielding an ornamental spear from the decoration, attacked Adam. Adam tried to explain himself, without success. While Adam tried to dodge the blows, Eva, quite frightened, fled through the window to the tower balcony, but losing her balance on the wet stones, plummeted into the ravine by the sea. Desperate, Adam rushed to her aid to try to save the child. Fortunately, he discovered that the girl was hanging by her nightgown, caught on the broken balcony railing. Adam stretched out and bent down to rescue Eva, grabbing her by the wrist. Elise, believing that Eva had fallen to her death, was overcome by a murderous rage. As Adam went to pull Eva up, Elise pierced him again with the spear. Overcome with pain, Adam's grip loosened, and Eva slipped into a fatal fall. All Adam had in his hand was Eva's torn nightgown. The spear was nothing to Adam, but now it was he who exploded into a maddened rage, attacking Elise with all his fury. At this moment, Modernheim entered the room, witnessing Adam's terrible violence as he carried the tatters of Eva's nightgown in his arms. Elise was gravely wounded on the verge of death, but Adam, confronted by his creator, and feeling Victor Mordenheim's emotions of absolute horror and hatred for his creation, chose to flee this home of pain and suffering, and jumped from the balcony. Victor wasted no time trying to find Eva. Faced with Elie's still living body, crushed and broken, he quickly took her to the same machines that he used to reanimate Adam's corpse, and used them to keep his beloved wife alive. The extremely painful process managed to artificially maintain her life, but may have destroyed her mind. Elise survived in a comatose state and required constant care. Modernheim's obsession now was to restore his beloved Elise to full form, and he isolated himself in his mansion, having only the ever-loyal Hawk as an ally. For several years, he dedicated himself to try to improve his life-restoring technique, and even create some other flesh golems, creations that he considered inferior and ended up destroying or abandoning. He then tried to steal some corpses and attempt brain transplant surgeries, trying to transfer Elise's brain to another body. His experiments, however, were unsuccessful. During this period, Victor had some unpleasant encounters with Adam, the vengeful creature, for whom he harbored deep hatred. Through painful confrontations, they realized that they had more than a telepathic link, but that they also shared the pain their bodies felt, and that mutual destruction was impossible. In a desperate measure, after years of keeping Elise alive by machines, Modernheim tried to adopt a new strategy to save Elise. He hired two necromancers from Ilaluk, Friedrich Krautzer and Hilda von Carsfield, who would help him attempt a soul transfer process in Elise to a new healthy body. The spiritual necromancers had settled in Schloss Modernheim and were preparing to begin their work, but Adam watched from the shadows and decided to stop these plans. Invading the mansion, he kidnapped Hilda and took her from the Isle of Agony to prevent the experiment. After Hilda's kidnapping, Modernheim hired an experienced hunter named Ivan Dragonov, and together with the necromancer Friedrich, they set out on a rescue expedition to the Isle of Agony. In those frigid lands, they found Adam's lair, and to their surprise, they found Hilda still alive. The creature had gone out to hunt to feed its prisoner. They quickly removed her from there, but Adam, consumed by fury, came after them. He attacked the group, facing the skilled hunter Ivan, who, to everyone's surprise, transformed into a werewolf, and in the fierce combat that followed, the ice shattered beneath their feet, and both Adam and Ivan were thrown into the frozen waters. Victor returned with Hilda and Friedrich to his mansion, so that the ritual could be completed. However, Hilda, convinced by Adam after hearing his version of the events, decided to sabotage the soul transfer ritual, and along with Friedrich, they escaped from Lamordia. Modernheim vowed never again to give into the impulse to use magical means to achieve his goals, and turned his efforts to perfecting his life support machine. His assistant Hogg was the victim of a terrible curse at the hand of a Vistani he had disturbed. Modernheim needed help with his activities and accepted an apprentice named Alex Wilhaven. As his study deepened, fate provided him with an excellent opportunity to test his progress. A naval accident occurred near the Schloss Modernheim, and a wounded and dying body was found at the rocky shores and taken into his care. The body was that of Rudolf von Albecker, the spoiled son of the ruling family of Lamordia and rightful heir to the throne. The scientist dismissed the body as impossible to save, but noticing that the brain was intact, he performed the surgical procedure to transplant it into a saline solution. Many experiments were conducted on the brain, which despite being alive, did not seem to respond to other stimuli. Over time, however, it developed psionic powers, and using its mental domination, it made both Modernheim and Alex Wilhaven work to develop an advanced and autonomous life support system for it. When the work was completed, the living brain dominated Alexis Wilhaven's mind and forced him to flee with it from Modernheim's laboratory, taking it to Port Alucine. After this setback with the psionic brain, Modernheim gave up on applying himself to a new life support system and brain transplants, and began to develop a new cellular regeneration process, intending to create a new body for Elise. His advances in the process of cellular regeneration led him to attempt to create a body through the process, and he used some of Hogg's tissue to try to recreate him. The experiments creates a creature even more hunchback and deformed than his first assistants, and completely without memory of the past. Modernheim named him Igor, and he begins to serve him as his predecessor. Disheartened with the final result of cellular regeneration, he attempts a new project of transmuting souls, but this time using scientific devices. Modernheim kidnaps a young woman to whom he intended to transfer Elise's souls into this complex equipment, but his plans are thwarted by the interference of adventurers. Giving up on the transfer of souls as unfeasible, he resumes his studies of cellular regeneration. His studies advanced significantly, but in the year 739, Adam acted again against his creator. Knowing that Modernheim was advancing in his cellular regeneration experiments, he invaded his property, and this time kidnapped Elise's comatose body. Despite the deep resentment he felt towards Elise, who he blamed for Eva's death and constant rejection, Adam was unable to destroy her. Knowing that Modernheim already knew the location of his lair in the Isle of Agony, he hid her in the monastery of the Quickening Thunderbolt, alongside the monks of the Order of the Seekers of the Spark. This order of reclusive monks is composed of flesh golems, the offsprings of Adam, who, rejected by their monstrous creator, organized themselves into a community where they created a religion and seek to replicate experiments to propagate their race. The kidnapping of Elise led Modernheim to use a band of newly created flesh golems, who had once been skilled adventurers, to try to rescue Elise and confront Adam. These skilled adventurers agreed to help Modernheim in exchange for the promise of the restoration of the natural bodies, and after a long expedition, they managed to rescue Elise and return her to Modernheim's care. Despite Victor Mordenheim's victory, his experiment was unable to fully recover Elise. He transplanted her brain into a new body, a clone of Elise created by cellular regeneration. However, although her shattered body was healed, Elise's mind is destroyed by years of trauma and experiments at the hands of her cruel husband, and she immediately attempts suicide. She is now kept in a straitjacket and cage, under constant care to prevent her from ending her life. Modernheim healed Elise's body, but not her mind, and now he must try new experiments on her deranged mind. The truth is that Victor is cursed to never be able to recover Elise, and only keep her alive and suffering because of his selfish and immoral nature. He knows that he is as guilty of this tragedy as his creation, and that his work has destroyed everything he most cherished. Victor finishes telling us his version of the facts in a calm and emotionless voice. Instead of reassuring us, we are even more disturbed, and we get up to leave this place. As we get up, we feel dizzy and fall to the cold floor. The scientists anesthetized us with whatever was mixed into the dose of the cognac, and we slowly begin to lose consciousness. Calm down and don't resist. I had to significantly increase the dosage to ensure your lycanthropic body was anesthetized. Don't worry. From the story I just told you, you know I am the most brilliant scientist and surgeon this world have ever known. The deformed hunchbacked servant dragged our still conscious bodies to the operating table, while Modernheim picks up his lab coat and scalpel. I will need your pathogen-infected bodies for my purposes, but I will transfer your intact brains into a new reanimated body, not taken over by lycanthropy. As I said, I have the cure for your affliction. We want to scream and fight for our lives, but we can't. A fog envelops our minds and vision. We awaken again, with a metallic taste in our mouths, and a terrible pain throughout our bodies. We have no memory of anything, or even who we are. We are on a stretcher and observe each other, seeing our new bodies made of scraps of corpses. Ah, you awakened. Excellent. The confusion should last a few days or weeks, but I hope the brain transplant was successful. In a few weeks, you regain some memories of your past. Who knows, you might even fully recover your identity. Without an answer, we look at the scientist. A feeling of frustration, despair, and anger overwhelm us, but all we can utter is an unintelligible groan of suffering. I will observe your progress, but I can't spend much time on side projects now. Igor, try to re-educate these creatures as best as you can. Some of them were intellectuals, thus perhaps they will appreciate books when they manage to recover these abilities. The horror of our existence is unbearable. After a few days, we are more able to move in these clumsy forms, and some memories and knowledge return to our minds. Some of us remember how to read, and confined within the mansion, we search for anything that might help us understand our fate. What the Modernheim libraries doesn't lack are treatises on construct and flesh golems. Join us, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and together let's unravel the secrets of the created and the dread golems. But first, in a brief pause from our explorations, let's explore the Lamordia's version in the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.